I try to help people kind of become more authentic with themselves and more in tune with themselves. Does this really feel right to you? Does this feel okay? Is this the way that you want to be treated?
Now, why is confrontation so hard to successfully execute on with our work and personal relationships? Staci and I give our thoughts, and we also dig deep on analyzing how our relationship with ourselves plays a key factor in our relationship with others. So, let's do it.
Too many days in the darkness without a glimpse of the light. Running tired and broken and scared, but I swear I'll never give up the fight. I see you broken and beat, head pulled down over your eyes. Every part of you wants to surrender, but darling, you were meant to survive. With every star.
So, what issues do your clients typically approach you with, you'd say?
So I work primarily with women. That's most of my caseload.
I should have had you on for Women's Health Month the other month. I had all these women on.
Oh, yes. We could have talked about the pregnancy and postpartum period.
Yeah. Next year.
Okay. I'll be here. But yeah, I work primarily with women and with moms or, people who are in like the perinatal stage, right? Pre-pregnancy, pregnancy, postpartum. And I also work with a lot of people with trauma, and a lot of stuff tends to kind of intertwine. So I work with a lot of young people because they're coming to me for trauma. And with that can also come with, the LGBTQ community and things like that. So my main focuses are moms and trauma, but I have all these other little things.
Yeah, you have a wide palette.
Yes. Yeah.
Is there like one commonality that you would say that they all share, or at least like somewhat share? I mean, like you said, trauma. Is there one part of trauma that they end up reaching out to? Because I got to think that there's some sort of stressor that makes someone go, okay, I'm stopping what I'm doing with my life right now, and I am going into therapy.
So a lot of what happens is they wind up having issues in the relationships because of
like dating relationships.
So, changes in the marriage that can happen as a result of the postpartum depression or anxiety. Having kids or trying to have kids can add a lot of stressors into the relationship, and a lot of that can cause trauma for people.
What part of trauma? You said, I believe younger people started coming to you with trauma issues, right?
Sometimes people don't even realize that they're dealing with like relational trauma where
it's become so norm.
Because it feels very normal, right? So parents that are like picking on them constantly throughout their whole lives or yelling at them or things like that, it feels like, oh, like that's just the way that it was. It's normal. It's whatever. And it was their normal, but it impacted them in a negative way where they might start acting that way in relationships, or they might wind up in relationships thinking that that kind of behavior is okay, or because they don't think that they deserve, right, anything different or anything better, because that's just kind of the way that it is.
Yeah. And they end up realizing that those methods of dating or the relationships end up not working because of there's consequences. Obviously, people don't want to stay with somebody who is yelling at them during a fight, like, the old married couple where everyone sees yelling at each other at a restaurant or fighting or communicating like that. That typically isn't something that the average person would deem as being okay in a relationship now.
Mm-hmm. Or the person on the receiving end is not, to them, it's not bad enough to leave.
That's a good way to put it. It's not bad enough to leave.
Yeah. Like I've had clients talk to me about their experiences in relationships, and we kind of explore like what's keeping you in the relationship. And I've heard from multiple people like, well, it's not like they hit me, or it's not like they did this. Yeah. So even though they're feeling horrible about themselves, right? Or they're suffering and hurting in the relationship, they don't feel like it's a good enough reason to walk away because they didn't do anything like horrendous enough.
That makes sense. I was speaking with somebody about another individual that I was saying is maybe not the greatest communicator and things, maybe isn't like the greatest human in the way they treat other people. And the person I was talking to eventually met that person. And, you know, just like a handshake type of encounter. And she was like, oh, yeah, he's not that bad at all. And I was like, because he didn't like spit in your face or smack you in the face, like yell at you. Like all he did was just like not do anything to you. And you thought that was that you viewed him as in a positive light just because he didn't do those things. And I'm like, really, just because somebody doesn't do things to you, shouldn't like put that person on a pedestal at all because they're not doing negative things.
Yeah, pretty much.
And how do you help people really like understand a different perspective to where they realize like maybe that's not a reason to stay in a relationship or to like stay in a job or to keep something around that's just not like abusing them?
I try to help people kind of become more authentic with themselves and more in tuned with themselves. Does this really feel right to you? Does this feel okay? Is this the way that you want to be treated? What if this was your best friend, right? And you were watching this happen. Would you be okay with them being treated like that? What makes it any different for you? Why is it okay that you're treated that way? So, you know, having people explore and get curious, not judgmental, but curious about it. Why am I allowing this? What is going on with me? What is this from? Why do I think that this is okay or I don't deserve anything better? Often will open up, you know, an opportunity for them to start to become curious enough to maybe make some changes. And I can also be very direct and tell them, you can leave just because you want to.
Yeah.
And sometimes they just don't even realize that.
And they probably have never had somebody tell them that before.
Especially when you're dealing with like people whose parents are involved in any way. And there's well, I'm only, you know, you're only getting older or they seem nice enough. Like there's not are you happy? Are you fulfilled? Does this feel good to you? Right? Are you following the social norms and getting married and putting yourself in a position to have children is a lot of the times what can happen as well. So, which when you deal with people that then want to please their parents, makes it really hard for them to step into what feels authentic and good for them because they don't want to disappoint.
I know that's a big thing in the Asian cultures, with not wanting to disappoint their parents. I mean, I watched an interview with an Asian male, I think in like his 20s or 30s, and Gary V was trying to like tell him like, oh, like, you know, have you know Gary V? He's a social media influencer, but like an older guy, like an entrepreneur, but a very a relatable guy where, you know, he talks with everybody. He goes out. He doesn't just like, you know, stay in mansions and stuff and then talk from, you know, podiums. And he was telling the gentleman, like, go out, do what you want to do, try things. And the Asian guy said, I will when my parents are no longer here, like when they die, because he didn't want to disappoint his parents that bad. And I have to say, like, there's like, especially in the culture today, like I respect that so much, like his thought to his elders and the people and taking into consideration that, because I don't think today there's a lot of that. But obviously when it's hindering your own career growth, any growth, I mean, you might as well then just be your parents then, really. You're not your own person at all if you're just taking that. So
you don't learn how to have boundaries.
Nothing, yeah. And do you find that one of these two things is more likely when you're speaking with somebody, that person maybe just is ignorant to a lot of things in their life. I think that's why we do need a therapist or somebody third party, independently looking at it.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think they just don't realize these things are happening? Or do you think that they don't want to confront things? They know it's happening, but they would rather stay in that situation and not confront things rather than confront things, which brings on its own challenges.
Mm-hmm.
Completely, especially if you're in like a dating relationship where now, okay, if I confront these things, it doesn't go my way. I might be by myself. I might have to move out. I might be in a different, have to do things for myself differently and really grow. Or they're just, they really, really just don't know, or a combination.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Because people don't know what they don't know. So if you tend to be around people that are kind of experiencing the same things, or they're around people that will make excuses because maybe it's uncomfortable for them to see their friend in an unhappy marriage, or their parent to think about them going through a divorce or to end the relationship or whatever, they're not necessarily going to get super objective, like
advice,
bringing it back to them. Right? What feels good to you? What feels right to you? What boundaries do you need to set in order to bring yourself back to peace within yourself?
Yeah.
So
that itself could be like throw your entire life in a different function, where you're like, oh my gosh, what does it? Am I happy? Like, am I happy the majority of the time? And then that just kind of like lights the fire.
Mm-hmm.
And have you seen some true growth from your clients when you do ask them those questions to weeks, months later? Is there anything, are they able to answer that question for themselves and then start acting on it?
Yeah. I mean, I have quite a few people that I've worked with long term. So I've really been lucky enough to see them from, the beginning of their journey up until currently where they are now. And doing that kind of self-work and allowing yourself to be curious can sometimes kick up emotions, right? So you also have to work on, can I feel whatever's going to come up for me and allow it to be there? When they start to get in that place of, oh, maybe there is something I should look at here, like that's really cool, because then they'll start to talk. Then they'll start to actually validate their own experiences and their own feelings versus being like, oh, things like weren't so bad, or it's over and it's done. Well, is it? Like technically, yes, but does it feel that way? Do you feel like you've moved on?
And then at that point, they're no longer sitting, leaning back. They're edge of the seat, leaning forward, hands on the knees, talking to you.
Yeah. So like, even if people are not out, setting super hard boundaries, like with their family or whatever, cutting off toxic relationships, if they're even starting to be willing to look at things or notice things and get a little bit more honest with themselves, that's a total win in my book, because it just opens up more room for growth for them.
Yeah, our relationship with ourselves, if we could chat about that for a second. How does that really affect our other relationships, the way we kind of view ourselves, talk to ourselves, treat ourselves?
Mm-hmm. So we're wired for connection. We are wired to be in relationship. But a lot of times what I think happens is we wind up putting the responsibility of our wholeness and our enoughness on our relationships with other people versus understanding and really getting in alignment with that. Like, we are valuable and whole simply because we are, right? Simply because we're alive, we have worth and value. But it's it can be really challenging to get there, because we'll have our stories about things that we've experienced in life, and when we're little, we make everything about us. So we don't get played with at school, it's because we're bad, or a parent yelled, or they divorced or something. It's, in some way our stuff. So, being able to recognize that and empower yourself to go, is it up to somebody else whether I'm enough, or is it up to me? Even starting to have awareness around that, when you start to feel not good enough, you can start to reality check. Is that true, or is this old stuff? Am I really not good enough because this person said or did something? Is that true?
Yeah. Are we asking ourselves, do people generally ask ourselves that question a lot of the time?
I don't know. I talk with my clients about it though.
Yeah.
I'll do it for my own self. If I have a tough experience and, my stuff gets kicked up, I'll kind of reality check my own self of, does that mean it's true? Okay.
Yeah. I feel like I just ignore things. Like I'll just try to sweep it right off over my head as quickly as possible I can and just keep it moving.
Yeah. I mean, that's also one way to deal with things.
Yeah.
But
you're like, Daniel, you're going to wind up in my office one day.
I know lots of people if you need somebody.
Yeah.
But, sometimes it depends on, I think, the energy, right? And the energy that you're carrying around it. So if it's something that's really benign and it kind of just hits you like a little bit, you might do that and it doesn't matter. It's fine. Right. But something that feels a little bit more sticky, like you might need to take a second, but to take a second means to be uncomfortable because you have to start to confront your own feelings around something. And who likes to feel not good enough, or to sit with that for themselves. Speaking
of confrontation, I think I've found this a huge issue with the millennial generation, my generation, which I'm love talking about because they're the largest populated demographic right now in the United States. And that's going to be that way for the next probably good to 30 years, 35 years. So millennials are going to dominate every sector. So it's their personalities, their intelligence is going to dominate the country. And I see on my own end, and I've had it with myself too, where confrontation, even when needed, that is the one thing I think we fear the most in doing. And not just confrontation, oh, you want to fight somebody or anything, not a confrontation like that, but just confronting emotions or, okay, this person's clearly stepping over my boundaries that a lot of times I think have been set in that person's head, but haven't been communicated to the other person, or have been communicated to the other person. And now they're allowing somebody to over those boundaries, which is basically them being stepped over. What is your experience with working with millennials and seeing how they're able to deal with confrontation? And also any success stories that you have where maybe you've talked it over with somebody and then weeks down the line, they come back and they've been able to say oh yeah, actually, no, they're fine with it. I told them, I set the boundaries, set the expectations, and they respect it. And it's such a better relationship.
Yeah. Even not only in relationships with their spouses or friends, or even their relationships with work. Setting better boundaries around work, right? Not overworking crazy hours or being really mindful if they're overworking here to, not to do it within context, right? If there's something that has to be done that has an end date, then being very mindful about that. But to confront something means being uncomfortable. And when you generationally grow up with, parents that are not teaching you how to feel your feelings and be okay with them, then you learn how to not be super comfortable with feelings.
Yeah.
Right? So to confront something is to feel something uncomfortable. And people, a lot of times, they just don't want to do that. They think it's easier to forget it or to move on, but then they wind up harboring a lot of negative energy typically. And the part of the deal with confronting something is you can still confront an issue and have compassion toward the person that you're talking to. It doesn't have to be super hard. It can be hey, you did this and it really upset me and I wanted to let you know. But the other issue around confronting is you don't know how the person on the receiving end is going to be. And unless people have some humility and self-awareness, people a lot of times will get very defensive. Well, I only did it because of blah, blah, blah. I'm really sorry if I hurt your feelings, but I only did it because, when at the end of the day, Are you hearing the person?
Do you think that that's why a lot of people do physical fitness a lot? Because that allows them to a certain degree, express like that displacement of whether it's aggression or whatever their negative thoughts that they're experiencing, that, all right, I'm going to go to the gym and I'll take it out there. Do you think that you're seeing that could be a possibility rather than actually expressing it to the exact source? Which obviously, like, if you have a fight with your boss, there's only a certain level of, aggression or coming back at them that you can really do without bigger consequences that would end up, causing you more aggression, but because I was guilty of this myself, where, go to the gym or play some sports, express yourself, get it out. But is that really the ideal way of relieving yourself of all of these emotions, when there's got to be some part of you, obviously you do feel better afterwards, but some part of you that still remains? You still have that resentment towards that person or that situation because you haven't actually confronted it fully 100%.
Mm-hmm. Sometimes you don't even need the other person in order to like confront it. Sometimes it's just having that, I don't know, internal dialogue or discussion with yourself around, how was I really impacted? What is this really about for me? Why am I so hurt? Or whatever the situation is. And if it's like, oh, because I felt, unworthy or not important, then the other person apologizing can apologize until they're blue in the face. That's not necessarily going to shift, if it hit for somebody that way. It's not necessarily going to shift what happened to them. It'll feel nice that they apologize. Maybe they'll feel validated that their feelings are valid. But whether the other person says anything or not, their feelings are valid. Our feelings are always valid. So, you can talk about it in terms of like going to the gym to get out aggression, or going to the casino, or going, doing drugs, drinking, shopping. I mean, there's a million ways that we try to get out of feeling, right?
Yeah.
So it really can be just about anything. I think what's hard is people, our feelings are meant to be felt. There's a really good book on it called Permission to Feel. I forget the author's name right now, but it's really good and it talks all about that. But it's important that we learn how to embody whatever that we're feeling so that we can actually let it go. Our feelings demand to be felt, right? It's a whole experience in the body.
Rather than trying to shove them down, because that makes a lot of sense the way you put it, because if we choose not to feel them, like, they're in there trying to be felt, and when you push them down, they're still there. Mm-hmm. And then I guess that's where like displacement really is born.
Mm-hmm. Or like, I'll hear clients talk a lot like, I'm so anxious, I'm so angry, I'm so depressed. And, they really identify as it, right? Versus I am feeling very anxious right now.
That is such a good point.
I'm feeling depressed. I'm feeling whatever. And we can also experience more than one feeling at a time, right? So you could be anxious and excited or whatever. But when I talk to my clients about stuff like that, I tell them to imagine like a roller coaster. And the feeling is like the roller coaster. Are you going to sit on it or are you going to watch it? Right. And so it's working on like, trying to be more an observer, right? You're still going to feel it because it's your body, but not becoming it, not drowning in it, which a lot of times people don't even allow themselves to get to the first part of, I have a feeling, because they're afraid that it's going to be too much for them.
With the roller coaster, though, it makes a lot of sense because you can observe it too. But on a roller coaster, any roller coaster in the world, you're going to feel extremely excited, scared, relieved at the same time when you're actually like go on a straight and rather than going upside down the whole time. So you are going to actually feel like all those emotions at the same time. And I'm a lone wolf on this. I think with majority of people my age, because I'm very like almost the only identity I have is like anti-identity, I guess, because
Cool.
when people call themselves something, I feel like they are putting on the uniform, and now they're wearing that uniform. And when somebody says I'm depressed, like it's almost like, saying I have pneumonia. You're taking on this entire responsibility that may not be the case, and probably is not, especially if you had just came from a situation where most normal people would also feel what you're feeling. Obviously long term, and when you're talking a month, 2 months, 3 months, and you're still feeling that's obviously very different. But we're so quick to just call ourselves something to identify. And I guess we're trying to reach for an answer. That might be it.
Sure.
But someone depressed, or the anxiety, that's like one that a lot of people use a lot too, but it's also like it has to be in like proportions. When I feel anxious even just like before the podcast, it's like,
Same.
Yeah. And I'm like, this is normal. I'm supposed to feel like this. It would be abnormal if I didn't feel like this. It would be abnormal if like I just like had a guest come on and I was like, all right, yeah, no, this is fine, and I'm not feeling anything.
But what if it was like that? Can that be okay?
Yeah.
Can you even take a step out of, the assumption of it, how you're supposed to feel? Like, it's more of I just feel this way. Can that be okay?
Being in the present.
Yeah, like this is what's happening for me in real time. Because maybe you weren't going to feel super anxious because we had chatted and whatever. Or maybe you did because you're like, I don't really know what I'm getting myself into. Like,
Yeah.
But it's more of the accepting and the allowing of whatever's happening in real time versus the judgment. And you can totally normalize things. It is totally normal to feel anxious before stuff like this. But even if you didn't, would it make it wrong?
No, you're right.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. It does. I think it's our quick like any negative we want to like just accept all the positive emotions and ditch the negative emotions. Get off me. I don't want to feel you. I don't want to feel you.
So I was listening to Tara Brock on a podcast, and she had said something, and it keeps like playing in my head. And she said, who do you think you could be if you understood your truth, that nothing was wrong with you? Something along those lines. Yeah. And I'm like, that is so true, because we're always looking to make ourselves enough, I think, or okay, or normal, or whatever in some capacity. And like, what if we're okay and enough and normal just as we are, without all the judgment that tends to like play into it? Like, what could people do? Who could they be? What could they accomplish for themselves if they stepped out of all of that judgment or all of that story about not being enough?
Yeah. I've seen a lot of things with affecting women. Actually, you're being predominantly your clients, with women being affected the most by like negativity on social media and judgment, especially because they're just comparing themselves and everything. And makes a lot of sense why that is driving the unhappiness. Do you see that with a lot of your female clients, that is maybe one of the biggest underlying issues that causes some sort of like negative behavior, and then you're just getting under the sheets, and then you discover it's probably because you feel judged every second of your life?
Sure. Yeah. Especially because I work with moms, and there's a million social media accounts. There's a million mom influencers, and, all these ones about how to feed your baby, and, do gentle parenting, don't do gentle parenting, sleep train, don't sleep train. There is a total rabbit hole of ways to feel inferior, incompetent, not good enough as a mother through social media. It is a really slippery slope. So, I'll talk about that with the moms that I work with, especially when they're getting really insecure about their parenting. Like, where is this coming from? nobody knows your baby like you. So we have to do a lot of like reality checking. Maybe we need to pull back on social
Just
media.
gonna say pull back. Yeah.
And, or, it's looking at, do you need to unfollow certain people?
Yeah.
What's at the end of the day, really, like, what's going to help you keep your peace and trust yourself? It's very hard for people to trust themselves and to allow themselves to step into the role of being a parent when they inundate themselves with 100 different ways to do it.
Yeah. That resonates because I was like, I'm going to be 30 in September. And I was like thinking to myself, I was like, why the fuck do I have a Snapchat still? I have Snapchat? like that was the thing, like in high school, college type stuff. And then I'm like, I even think about that once in a while. I'm like, I don't even use this. I haven't posted anything in like 2 years, at least 2 to 3 years, probably. And at that point, it was probably just something I posted with friends and everything. And I'm like, why do I still carry it? And then I just see like Facebook just comes out with threads the other day. And I see that now in everybody's Instagram bio, threads. And I am cringing because I'm just thinking to myself, really, I don't think we need more of it. Like there's another social media platform now being pushed down people's throats. And it saddens me, the rush of normal people that I see doing it. Like people in the business where, there are social media influencers and people like that. I get it. But now I see a lot of people that, 100, 200 followers. It's just a casual thing. They've gotten threads. It's in their bios now. And I'm just like, man, you talking Twitter, Facebook, threads now. Did I say Instagram already? I didn't say Instagram. Instagram, TikTok. And I'm like, you can spend hours on these each time. And another one. It's just, it's disheartening to see, especially because we all know the result of it.
Right. It's this really disconnected way to try to connect with other people.
That's a good way to put it.
It's very...
Threads is just another...
And people they really can form relationships through social media, but I don't know, like, how often that's like really, really happening, So it can definitely happen, but it's also more time consumption. And the more that you're attached to your screen, the less you're spending time with yourself as well,
That's true too, because the last thing I'm thinking about when I'm on Instagram is myself.
Yeah, because you're looking at everyone else's
stuff. Yeah.
Oh, what happened here? What happened there? What's this person posting about? Oh, try avocados first for the baby. Okay.
Oh, and it's so stupid too, because especially here in Miami, like I'll if I'm out with people or so, right? Like I'll know how that night was. Like, all right, we go out, drinks, whatever, come back home like it was nothing Hollywood movie style, like night out where it's like, very expensive champagne and it's an extravagant night. It's a very normal night. And then the next day, I like wake up, it's a post from someone at that night with a picture of them. And the caption is, last night was a movie. You know what I'm saying? And I'm just like, that is so disingenuous because it's so inauthentic because I was there. You have a filter on your photos. That's like the best take out of 12 photos. And they're trying their best to project themselves in a certain light that is incorrect because they're describing their night emotionally as it being an amazing night. It was an amazing night. When I know it wasn't. It wasn't a bad night. It wasn't a bad night, but it wasn't that night,
Maybe it felt amazing for that.
I know them though. I know them. There's
not so much.
And usually those posts too, those Instagram posts where people really, like, hey, this is like, it's an emotional thing. Usually like if it was, it's a couple days after where they're reflecting on it and, they want to share it. But like, a post the next day, like at like 7:38 in the morning, it's almost like they went out intentionally to post that. Is almost like, where I'm like started like my suspicions start.
And it's fascinating. I think all that stuff is really interesting, because it's like, who do you want people to think that you are, and why aren't you just good enough as you are? Why do you need to, you know, portray all this other stuff, which is a whole rabbit hole.
It's a whole nother,
it's a whole rabbit hole for people.
What would you say if there is a general overlap here that you would say is the biggest emotional problem affecting people today that you see come in? I know you said a lot with trauma. Would you say it's trauma that is then leading behaviors in their life that they do not really fully understand why they're doing these behaviors, when in reality it is the trauma that's causing them to do these, if it's behaviors or the way they're dealing with their relationships in life that they now are trying to change?
Yeah, I think the overarching thing that tends to happen is people with more relational trauma, and you have the other, you know, big T trauma of, you know, sexual abuse and things like that. And I work with people that have dealt with that, but there's still a relational component to that of, you know, betrayal and all sorts of things. But a lot of it tends to be like family issues that have happened throughout their childhood and their life that they carry with them, the way that they, or even relationships with peers, you know, being bullied or picked on, and it's impacted the way that they see themselves. And so they are more likely to stay in toxic relationships or toxic friendships, or they ice people out really quick. So it winds up coming out in relationship with other people. It doesn't mean that everything looks horrible all the time. Like we none of us really get through childhood unscathed. We all have our stuff, you know, but it's a lot of times they don't really understand, like, oh, I'm icing people out because it's the only way I know how to protect myself from getting hurt again, or, oh, I do this because of this. And then when you don't have any awareness of yourself, there's no opportunity for shifting it. Because if it's bothering them that they can't keep relationships in their lives, well, what's going on? You know, giving them space to just get really curious and really trying to step out of judgment is really important, because their relationship with other people has impacted their relationship with themselves, right? And how they see themselves. Am I worthy? Am I lovable? Am I enough? You know, am I deserving? All of that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. The question thing is something too, for anyone listening, is a really great tool that you can practice just with yourself on at home. I feel like I was just advertising for like at home gym equipment right there, but you can do it at home. Yeah. Well, but it is something you really
can. Yeah. So, you know, sometimes I'll tell my clients that are really struggling with a situation or really not liking how they're handling something, I'll tell them to put the whole situation up on a movie screen, right? And to look at it from as like a third party, right? So it's not really you up there, it's somebody. Can you get curious? Well, why would they do that?
Yeah.
Why would they do that thing? Or why would they respond that way? Or what could be going on with them?
Yeah.
Because if you can step into more curiosity, you have opportunity for more compassion. If you have more compassion, things don't feel as heavy because you can understand I'm a human.
Yeah, the empathy behind it. Yeah.
You know?
That makes a lot of sense. And it's a good thing. It's a good thing for people to walk away with too, because, you know, compassion is like especially in your stressful environment, is the best method for longevity, because you're not constantly fighting something. You're more accepting of people, and that plays a role on those people too, where like, oh, that person's not acting like everybody else is when I treat them like that. They're actually acting the opposite, which is like with compassion, and hopefully those scenarios that person realizes it and they don't decide to take advantage of that person and squash them.
And they might, but that is still about that person and not about the person that, you know,
it's a skill. It's really a skill to because you're battling your own emotions, you're battling your own fight and physiological response to lash back out. So Staci, thank you for all this.
Thanks for having me.
You're amazing.
Thank you.
And I hope to link up down the road, and maybe we can chat more about women and postpartum and motherhood, because that is an issue that is going to definitely affect and is affecting millennials right now.
Yeah.
Seriously. Especially when you're talking having kids later in life and
There's
a lot more.
That is a whole episode.
Yes, that is a whole episode, which we will link back up again soon. And we'll see you down the road, Staci.
Awesome. Thank you.